So the question is, would you rock it or not? So how many 59 burst-inspired guitar builds does one guitar player need? Just one more. And that just one more today is this Seraph VNS by Springer Guitars. Check that out. So this isn't a sponsored video. These guitars caught my attention and I had the opportunity to pick this one up and check it out. But before we dive in, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. The channel's approaching 10,000 subs, which is a really amazing milestone, and I really love and enjoy the community we built around this channel. I've learned a ton and I've had a ton of fun along the way, so thank you for the continued support. Many of you have asked, where can you find my original music? And I'm happy to say my EP is now available, so if you are interested in previewing that music and or supporting the channel further, it's available for purchase. So let me know what you think. And so as always, I'll dive deep into several sound demonstrations. I'll also talk about the story around how I came upon this guitar, cover off the specs, and then also I'd like to share what it is that I find so appealing about these small builder 59 inspired guitars and what it is that I think separates them from some of the offerings from Gibson when it comes to 59 reissues. So let's dive in. So let's start out with some clean tones, and I'll toggle through all three pickup positions and play some different parts up and down the neck. Let's check it out. So I think the guitar responds extraordinarily well to a pick and to finger picking. It has a very nuanced response, which I value tremendously as a player. And I found the guitar to be really balanced in all registers. No dead spots, and intonation was flawless up and down the neck. So Springer guitars are based out of France, and they're made by Michael Springer. I believe he's a one-man operation. He's got a few different models that seem to focus in on his own unique take on golden era Gibson designs with very high craftsmanship and quality materials. I had first heard about Springer guitars via Sunbear pickup. Stu from Sunbear supplies the pickups to Springer, and the guitars just look super cool to me. Quite an original take on a classic design, which I love. And I noticed Chris Buck from Cardinal Black and of YouTube guitar fame was also playing Springer guitars, in particular a Firehawk model, which is Springer's take on the classic Gibson Firebird. And that sounded killer to me as well. So my gas was engaged and I started researching Springer guitars. And I found that there is one dealer in the US, that's Amelia Island Guitars out of Florida. And they had a demo of this exact guitar up on their site. And sadly, it had already sold. But the guitar sounded absolutely killer, and you could tell that the player seemed also just viscerally inspired by the guitar as well, which is always a good sign. So I frantically started searching for inventory, new or used, and there just virtually was nothing available in the US. So I set up a Reverb search feed, and the stars aligned because 5 or 6 weeks later, this exact model from Amelia Island Guitars came up in my feed. And it happened to be a seller that I bought a few other really awesome 59 inspired burst guitars from. So we seem to have very similar taste. So I already have a killer Gibson 1959 reissue. So what is it about these small luthier 59 inspired burst guitars that I find so appealing? So I think the first thing that I find appealing about these style guitars is they're made by one person or a small team of people. And I think the attention to detail that can be achieved in that context is pretty extraordinary, both in terms of the craftsmanship and the materials. And while I think Gibson is making some of the best guitars they ever have, when you're doing it at a much larger scale like Gibson, I just don't think it's possible to recreate some of the nuance and care that goes into these smaller builds. And so from that perspective, I think you really get a bespoke, incredibly high quality instrument that is very inspiring to play. The second thing I really love about these style guitars is when it comes to legacy and heritage. A 59 burst, of course, I love the heritage and legacy of all the players that we associate to those models and the music that they made. And that's why I'll always have a Gibson Les Paul in the collection. And at the same time, I think that's the advantage of playing some of these small luthier 59 inspired builds, is that they don't have those same associations. They're more of a blank canvas creatively. And I find that really inspiring to just let the guitar take me to new places. So up next, I'll kick on some light overdrive with my trusty Vemoram Jan Ray. And again, I'll play through all three pickup positions and let's check out how the guitar sounds in that context. So I'm really hearing everything that I want to get out of a guitar like this. It's full but not muddy, it's clear, it's touch responsive, and it's bright but not harsh, with wonderful articulation. And the thing that I was pleasantly surprised by is I found that it had quite a jangly characteristic in that context. I think that has something to do with the 25-inch scale length, which gives it a little bit more snap than the conventional shorter 24 and 3/4-inch scale lengths on the Les Pauls. And I also wonder if the Spanish cedar is contributing a little bit of that additional brightness and articulation. But whatever it is, I think it's a wonderful sounding recipe. So I'm going to stick with a light overdrive in this next sample and focus in on the neck pickup. And I'm going to play the rhythm part from the opening track, which I had originally recorded with the Springer, but I ended up replacing it with my recently acquired 61 335. This guitar had just come in, so I was quite excited to hear how it sounded in the studio. So I replaced the track and I thought it worked really well. Sometimes it's nice to have complementary guitars doing rhythm and lead. But the reason for mentioning it is this guitar's got genuine PAF pickups. And what I was struck by with the Springer is these Sunbear 59s have just a wonderful and authentic PAF style voice to them. And while PAF pickups are all over the map and the 335 has a 61 spec, whereas these are going for a 59 spec, I do find that PAFs just have this certain common characteristic despite some of the differences. And I really thought that these pickups deliver on that. So really impressed with the articulation, tone, and touch sensitivity of the Sunbear 59s. Let me know if you've tried those pickups and if you've had any luck with them. I'm really curious to actually check out Stu's 57 and 58 wines. They've really caught my attention. So in terms of the specs on this one, it's many of the classic specs you would expect from a 59 inspired build. It has a two-piece flame maple top. It has a typical stop tail ABR, classic 50s wiring, 2 volumes, 2 tones, paper and oil caps. You've got the typical plastics on a 59 burst. You have 2 59 PAF style pickups from Sunbear. You've got the 3-way switch, set neck, And you've got the one-piece body. In this case, it's Spanish cedar. The neck is also Spanish cedar. And for any Les Paul aficionados, you would know that Spanish cedar was very common in the early 50s Gibson gold top guitars. So this is my first time getting to check that wood out finally, so super excited about that as well. It's got a bound neck. I'm not sure about the neck dimensions, but it is certainly a 59 style carve, and it's beautifully done. And some of the more unique features on the guitar is that it has a much shallower neck angle than on a typical Les Paul, and a much shallower headstock angle as well. And in addition to a volute on the back to strengthen the neck to mitigate any potential for headstock breakage. It's got typical Clouson style tuners, bone nut. This one has a Madagascar rosewood fingerboard. Michael offers other options, including Brazilian rosewood, old growth, Amazon rosewood, and Indian rosewood as well, I believe. And this guitar is finished in genuine nitro and has some very beautiful patina, some lacquer checking, and some mild relicking. I would say it's pretty subtle stuff, maybe more on par with a Gibson Murphy Lab light aged. And the guitar just has a beautiful aura about it. It really conjures up that 59 burst vibe, but with its own unique twists and turns. So one of the things I don't envy trying to put myself in the shoes of some of these small builders is coming up with original body shapes and headstock designs. I think many guitar players, and understandably so, are just used to what a Gibson headstock and body shape is, and Fender and so on and so forth. So to really break through with something that's original and still aesthetically appealing, I think is no small feat. And I think Michael's really cracked the code here in a wonderful way. I really like the shape and lines of the body. And I think it's a nice touch that the inlays seem to take some inspiration from the body shape. That symmetry extends to the headstock shape as well. So just a really cohesive design. Everything looks in balance with beautiful lines. I think it's a really cool original take on the 59 burst. So up next, I'm going to focus on some lead playing with a boosted overdrive tone using my Vemoram TSV 808, boosted with my exotic soul driven. And again, I'll go through all three pickup positions and cover all registers of the neck. Let's check it out. So I'm really impressed. Not only does this guitar sound wonderful in a rhythm context, but I think it really shines and speaks strongly in a lead context as well. There's a lot of character in all three positions with a lot of quack, chime, and balloon. And it's just a really addicting sound and playing experience. And so to elaborate a little bit more on the playing experience, I'm usually hesitant about 25-inch scale length guitars. I find they sort of sit between the classic Gibson and classic Fender, and it can sometimes be annoying switching to 25-inch scale lengths if you're more used to those conventional scale lengths. And I find that the 25-inch, it's a little more taut than Gibson, not as taut as Fender. So it's kind of in no man's land. However, it does add something to the tone. I love that snap and articulation it adds. And I think Michael's really dialed in the perfect neck angle, ABR height, because the 25-inch scale length on this guitar, it's really not a hard transition or a transition I notice when switching from my Gibson style scale length guitars. I'm not sure how he pulled that off, but I feel like you get the benefit of the 25-inch scale length sonically without any of the drawbacks of the sometimes stiff feel that I find that 25-inch scale lengths can tend to have. So really cool. So the most important thing I look for in a guitar is inspiration. Inspiration to play, express myself, and to create. And I think one of the great litmus tests for that is to simply put on a backing track and improvise and see where the guitar takes you. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I will toggle through the various pickup positions and also manipulate the tone and volume controls to coax out different shades of color out of this guitar. And let's see where it takes me. So I can safely say this guitar has been an inspiration right out of the gate. It has a very articulate voice that I find to be quite inspiring and a joy to play. And on top of that, I think it really is voiced perfectly. It really cuts through a mix. Now that wasn't a super dense track, but there's literally no mixing or EQ that's required to get this thing to speak. It just sits in the right place. I think that's a great testament to both Michael's design and his choice in the Sun Bear pickups as well. So the question is, would you rock it or not? It's an original twist on a classic design. It has a very unique look, and I would be very curious to know what you think of it. Personally, for me, I love the design. I think it looks super cool. And the body shape is very ergonomic. I find it actually sits more balanced on my lap sitting down than a traditional Les Paul. I think this thing, to keep it real simple, it's got a great sound, it looks cool, and the playability feels wonderful. So it ticks all the boxes in terms of what I look for out of a great instrument. So if you're in the market for something a little different than the conventional Gibson Les Paul, I think Springer guitars are worth checking out. And if you've been following the channel, you know that I have an obsession with boutique 59 inspired builds. And I've owned and or played some of the best models from the best makers, from Johann Gustafsson to Gil Yaran, to Tom Bartlett, to Gene Baker from B3, Ron Thorne, Nick Huber, and the list goes on. And I can also say that Michael Springer has really put himself into that class of builders with just an exceptionally inspiring instrument. So some cool stuff in the pipeline to look forward to. As I mentioned earlier, I got my 61 335 back with a fresh refret. It came out fantastic, so I can't wait to do some videos on this guitar. And I'm happy to say I finally got my hands on a PRS DGT SE model that we can finally compare to the core version. There's been a lot of continued traffic on my PRS 594 SE versus core model, so I'm really excited that I can finally do this comparison that many of you have been asking for. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, thanks for watching, take care, and I will see you in the next video.